We think there's certainly advantages to a fee for service model, but there's also advantages to a commission model. And my argument is, why should there be a battle between one versus the other? If we are a free market, consumers have the choice. Why don't we give them the widest possible range of choices? And the reason I say that is we've seen studies out of the UK that showed mystery shoppers, which is technically some regulatory people, industry experts, they go into an institution and they found widespread situations and conflicts in terms of products, in terms of suitability, et cetera. Under a fee-for-service model, we're not sure if that will address those issues, because a fee-for-service model just design a different way of compensation and not necessarily deals with the issues of disclosure and transparency, et cetera.
Okay, so why would that take away from that? Isn't that just solely in terms of how the independent financial advisor is paid? Why would there be an overlap in the procedural process?
Okay. A very good question, and it's not necessarily the fact that there's an overlap. It's a matter of different market segments. The ultra-high net worth, which generally are the highest income earners, they tend to have the largest investment portfolios, they tend to pay a fee which is a very, very tiny percentage of their overall assets that's being administered. But if we take the little guy, for example, in Canada, where the average net worth of an individual is just below $150,000, most of that is tied in real estate, which means that if the average person have about $75,000, he's below the radar of the target market for this fee advisors. Where are they going to get access to the services? They will not and don't have the capacity to pay that fee. So they would much rather see a system where they don't, as long as they're not paying the fee, or the perception that they're not paying the fee, would make them more open towards seeking advice in the first place.
Let's go to a bit more broad issue. So we're still, many nations, of course, are still struggling with unemployment. The list goes on, right? Some analysts are saying it's going to get worse before it gets better. IMF is saying we're out of the dark. What do you see on a very microeconomic level from your business?
Well, from a Canadian perspective, I can say that in Canada, while we are still struggling with since the 2008 economic crisis, we are doing a little bit better than other places around the world. What's important is the need for advice, the need of helping people being proactive, the need of helping them understand their situations. Are they prepared for the various challenges that the future holds? So, for example, the clients who do provide planning or access financial planning understand that they need to live within their means. So we try to work with clients to help them live within their means. Second thing is this cushion of an emergency fund. They must have an emergency fund, because in the event of a financial crisis, generally 2 to 3 months of emergency funds is a good thing, because it allows them to coast a lot better in difficult times. Unfortunately, that's not the case in many instances. So the victims at the ground level, the victims of the 2008 crisis, the victims of the individuals who are having financial problems, are those who were not prepared in the first place. Over leverage, as you see, the cause of the crisis was excess leverage. But it's the little investor too, who was not living within their means, overextended themselves through credit cards, consumer debts, line of credit, etc. And the problem is, if they lose their job, the revenues aren't there to sustain. So in Canada, for example, we have a lot of warnings about Canadians should reduce the amount of debt they're using. But with today's, the incentives to save is not very good, with savings account paying very little, if any, in terms of real return. You know, in Canada, an average savings account right now will pay about 1%. With a 2% inflation, that's a negative 1% return. So you're banking to lose money, essentially.
And it's really unfortunate that it's set up that way, because no one's incentivized.
Exactly.
Yeah. I'd love to get an idea of your perspective in terms of, what your key concerns are as an independent financial advisor. Do you believe that somehow you guys can go extinct with all this bureaucracy and all the shifts that are occurring? And how do you see, what are the mechanisms for survival and indeed success?
Well, I think the most important mechanisms for survival is to help your client achieve their financial goals and objectives. The challenge with that is you have a number of various industry forces that's causing what we call an excessive load. So for example, regulation. Regulation will cause an increase in terms of, not that nothing is wrong with good regulation, but excessive regulation means you have to have staffing. Today at the CIFA conference, we just saw some statistics that show that there's a 25% increase in human resources. There's a 70% increase in technological costs. These are the costs that we have to still invest in the business, and it's an added cost. And already a marginalized business, you add another 20% on human resources, another 70% on IT costs, not to mention the legal and compliance, you can literally cause an organization to not exist. So it's a fight for survival. My major concern is how are we, yeah, it's a very real threat.
I'm sorry, and I didn't mean to cut you up. And your major concern?
My major concern is how do we thrive and survive at a profitable level while trying to meet the needs of the client? There's a push to, the client wants to pay less, regulatory costs are going up, human resources costs are going up. How do we create an effective, profitable, viable business model?
Okay. And then a question on CIFA. Why are you a member?
Okay.
And what are the benefits of being a member? And maybe kind of to wrap it up, what can CIFA do even within itself to be more powerful?
Well, the most important thing is I think CIFA plays a major role. We have to approach the issues at both a top-end and bottom-up approach. Top-end means we need a strong global voice. More and more, because of the internet, we're global citizens, the world is more integrated. And so we can't really laugh at misery at one end of the world if we think we're sitting pretty on our end. We're in this big boat, and if the boat is going down, we're all going down, eventually. So I think CIFA plays a major role because what CIFA does is take the intelligence of different pockets of the world, in Europe, in Asia, in North America, and try to bring a credible, believable, realistic sense of the problem to the United Nations, who we believe we might be able to influence some of the change and legislation going on worldwide, the global trends. For our organization in Canada, our issue is more about making sure there's transparency, stable economies, making sure Canadians have a chance to reach their goals and objectives. And we feel that the association with CIFA helps us in meeting our mandate, both at a domestic level and to also give our Canadian voice at an international level.